In early August, after driving north to Berkeley, I settled into a room at the guest house of a monastery in the Berkeley Hills. The guest house was lovely and comfortable and very quiet. It had a balcony with views over the city and out to the San Francisco Bay beyond. Cool air and fog and sun kept me company, along with birds and deer, and glorious tall trees made my many walks feasts of scents and sights. I was in Berkeley to take a class at the Pacific School of Religion, which is a seminary connected with the United Methodist Church, the United Church of Christ, and Disciples of Christ. It is one of a number of seminaries that sits on what locals call Holy Hill, and it has a summer program that is full of rich offerings. The class I took this summer was a week-long look at preaching women, at names and stories and lives that we have not learned much about. Looking at bringing those stories to life and at bringing our own stories to life in the process, while learning about and enhancing the craft of preaching. We talked about church history and about new things that are happening and that need to happen. People on the margins, marginalized people, finding each other, harmonizing, building something new and significant. Our professor, the Reverend Dr. Yvette Flunder, founded the City of Refuge Church in San Francisco, starting in her own living room. And that was more than 20 years ago. Her congregation is mostly African American and mostly persons who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. And she said about herself, half joking, that when she's invited to speak somewhere, they save all sorts of money on plane fare. They can check off so many boxes. Woman, check. Black, check. Lesbian, check. Clergy, check. Dr. Flunder has a Pentecostal background, which she refers to as Methodist-Baptist-Costal. And that speaks about all the many influences on the African American churches. Her theology now is very recognizable to us, a theology of transformation and hope and inclusion. After looking at several denominations, her congregation became part of the UCC. Around the same time, she also founded the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, which is an international fellowship of over 100 mostly African American pastors, lay persons, churches, organizations who are dedicated to adding more chairs to the table. Their main goals include creating and sustaining and celebrating community on the margins. They gather to support one another and their ministries and are of a variety of backgrounds. Interestingly, almost all of them are now affiliated with the UCC. They are working on opening up theologies, on being radically inclusive, on being involved in their communities, such as with green justice. My class was a diverse group, 21 of us, ranging in age from early 20s to a couple of great-grandmothers, from working class to middle class backgrounds, various sexualities, a woman from Jamaica, a number of European American white women, an African American man, and a number of African American women. Preachers, teachers, students, a woman who runs a shelter for women, a woman who works in prisons, a couple of chaplains, an interim pastor, urban and suburban pastors, most of them in the UCC. So many stories, so many experiences, some of which made their way into the sermons which we preached for each other on our last day of class. Those sermons were the culmination of the class, and in order to have time for all of us to preach, our sermons could only be 5 or 6 minutes long. It was an incredible experience, that sermon preaching day. What a listening group we were for each other, actively listening, calling out amens, groaning in recognition, calling out, "That preaches," or "Preach it, sister." We paused after every few sermons to respond and to reflect, to share what came up for us as our classmates spoke. Here are a few tidbits from my classmate's sermon, and then I'd like to share with you the sermon that I preached that day. Yvonne brought us the story of the woman, the prophet named Huldah, whose story is found in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. She wove a tale of lost scrolls found hidden in the floor of a church building, and she brought down the house with this line, "Can you believe they found the word of God in church?" Dinah used the story of Mary and Elizabeth in Luke to speak about unscheduled events in life and of the importance of being together, of staying together, of supporting each other. Sarah told us a Zen story about calm waiting and peace, of spiritual assurance, of responding rather than reacting, and a repeated phrase, "We shall see, we shall see." When it was Terry's turn, she told us that her intended audience was a 12-step group. She used the metaphor of a ladder, the ladder of worth. She said that we can step off that ladder, that we can stop climbing up and down, comparing ourselves to other people, judging ourselves against others, that we can make a mistake without being a mistake, that we are enough. Step off the ladder, she said. Get both feet off the ladder and onto God's green earth. You are enough, she said. You are enough. Dawn spoke about the story of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, and about how we all too often go from Lazarus' death right to his return to life, overlooking the grief, overlooking the mourning. We need to mourn, she said. We need to weep. Amazingly, since we were going in alphabetical order, Shelley's sermon took right up where Dawn's left off. She spoke of Lazarus having a choice, a hard choice, whether to come back or not. She imagined Lazarus thinking, why is Jesus calling me? What's that light? And then the kicker, Jesus telling Lazarus, if you do come back, you will be a living witness to love and to life, to transformation, becoming an inspiration. Religion, Sharon told us, should not leave you hungry. And she expanded on that theme, sprinkling eating and food metaphors throughout her sermon. Religion should not leave you hungry. And Claudia spoke Ruth to life for us. Ruth, who opens herself to the possibility of being served. Ruth, who eats until she is satisfied, not worrying about being seen as selfish for putting herself first. These are strong and important words, for women are all too often taught to put everyone else first. Lana preached from Genesis and spoke about Dinah. Dinah who traveled out each year to visit the daughters of the land, traveling alone and unencumbered. Oh, this is important, she told us. It is life-affirming for women to travel on their own. She spoke, too, about the importance of knowing how to be alone, how to be good company for ourselves.